At the when the production was finished, I received some positive feedback, both from G, the star of the documentary, who said it gave a fair overview of what birdwatching is like, and he praised its use of the subtitles for the species, because he says when he watches nature documentaries and they don't include that, he finds that intensely annoying, because he wants to know what the animals are. It was also popular in America. I was blogged about on the Birdchick blog, the 22nd most popular blog, birding blog on the internet, which basically embedded the video and said how good it was. And Bird Guides, who are a company who film and produce wildlife videos themselves, had very positive words to say about it, describing me as a cross between an investigative journalist and David Attenborough. So, Ross Bayfield, student filmmaker, what did you feel about Ornithologic?
Very interesting. Very, it's got very instructional basis on how to birdwatch. It's very pleasing to the viewer who doesn't quite know what the subject's about. It's as a documentary. It's got very professional. It's got all the things that a documentary should have. It's got interviews with professionals on the subjects. It's got information that can be used by people who don't necessarily know what the subject is. That's probably the purpose of a documentary in itself, to give information to those that don't quite know about it very well. So I think it provides that in a way that can be accessible from people from all walks of life, and it's interesting and good.
A documentary is a form of reality TV, and so what this does is it provides you lots of theoretical scope from which to judge your documentary by, such as Plato and his allegory of the cave and the puppet handlers. And what this is that Plato said that if there was a cave and in which people were chained up and forced to look at the wall of the cave in darkness, and in the middle was a fire, and puppet masters would come and display images which would then be distorted by the firelight and projected onto the wall as a distorted version of this. And Plato said that if one of the prisoners was to be freed and to be shown reality as it actually was, they wouldn't recognise it and they would go back to the wall for the truth. And so what this is about, this relates to documentaries because they pertain to show the reality, but obviously the reality they show is a distorted representation taken and added meaning to by the media and the editing process. And so what this does is that when you would be presented with an actual real-life example of one of this, of the subject you've just watched a documentary on, and it would be different, but you wouldn't recognise it as different because you took the represented version that the media showed you to be truth. This is obviously relevant to my documentary, but as the audience feedback has shown, I think I've managed to avoid misrepresenting them quite well, due to the sense of realism in it, helped obviously by my experience as a birdwatcher. And there was no elements of voyeurism in the documentary. You wouldn't watch it for the voyeuristic because it wasn't a freak show. I didn't specifically go out and find examples of weird people and giving weird stories and presenting that like it was true. Digital technology's proliferation in the media means that I had to use it for my production. For the actual cameras, we used to work Canon FS100 video cameras, which were useful for the handheld sort of interview shots and the shots of the landscape, but due to the zoom wasn't really of good enough quality to film wildlife. So what I did was I got my Nikon P5100 compact camera and attached it to a telescope and managed to film the wildlife that way. That method's known as video scoping, and I was pleasantly surprised about the quality of it, which was as good as the Canon FS100 video cameras. I used Final Cut Express software for the Apple Macs because we used industry standard Apple Macs, and it was a very intuitive and easy to use software I found, which is in which you can perform all sorts of the sort of You can cut, you can apply effects, you can edit the audio separately, you can split screen and stuff. I obviously didn't do that, but it's got a wide scope for all sorts of digital effects. I really like using the software. I used a blog to document the process of the research and the planning and the filming and the evaluation, which I found was a very good way of publicly displaying my ideas, using it to disseminate questionnaires and to garner feedback from. And also, the public element of the blog is good because it means that you obviously don't want to embarrass yourself or hinder your project by writing something incorrect on the blog. So it teaches you to be very concise with the information. It teaches you to be. It taught me to be very sure about what I was doing, and it taught me to be a lot more balanced in what I was writing. As well as the documentary, I had to produce 2 ancillary tasks. One of those was an article for a listings magazine, such as the Radio Times, and the other was an advert for a broadsheet newspaper. I was particularly pleased with the advert. They shared a symbiotic aesthetic. They both looked similar, but it was quite unique design, I felt. Got the advert here. As you can see, the title, big, bold. Font was clear, a Helvetica font. It's clean and it's stylish, but it's also big and bold, which drew the reader's attention in. And then I had a 3/4 still from the footage of my dad looking through a telescope, which I thought was an unusual image, which would also track the viewer of the advert in. And I photoshopped a robin onto the top of the title. It's a bit humorous, really, but a humorous touch. But again, that's unique and it's different to the normal sort of adverts you would find. But it still is obviously identifiably an advert. And down here I had brief information upon the what it was, because ornithologic doesn't really give you much information as a title if you don't know what ornitho means. So I gave brief information here. Concise is the key. You don't want to waffle on about meaningless information on an advert. It's meant to be brief. You're meant to hardly not notice that you're reading it, but you still are. And I got the BBC 4 logo down here just to emphasise the channel on which it's being shown. The Listings magazine article, I found a copy of the Radio Times and I went through it and found an article which I analysed, and I found that they weren't straightforward articles about something. It was the journalist was also placing himself in the first person and writing about him meeting someone, where they went on to interview him about and talk about the documentary or the television show they're writing the article on. And so I copied this style. I found it very easy to do, although it's quite weird referring to myself as the third person whilst writing in the first person, which is a weird experience. The layouts were quite easy to copy in a way. The Radio Times is a very simple layout, focusing more on big pictures and big titles in which to do. I created them and the advert on Adobe Photoshop, which is a software that's not particularly easy to use if you don't know how to understand it, but I've been using it for quite a while, so I consider myself quite experienced at using it. There was also a similar, the layout and design of the article linked in with the advert, and some of the pictures used were similar, helping work cross-media fertilisation